they want to. Talk, don't bother.
And welcome to Let 'Em Talk. I'm Paul Durienzo.
And I'm Miss Joan Marie Musi.
And our guest is Melissa Broudo. Welcome, Melissa, to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And Melissa's an attorney with the Streetwalkers Organizing Project?
Sex Workers Project.
Sex Workers Project. I'm sorry. Well,
close enough.
You know, it's funny. I'm sorry I said that, but it's the word that went through when I saw SW.
That went through your mind. Oh.
Right. It
Yes.
went through my mind when I saw SW. I'm sorry I said that, but
No,
it's, you know.
But it actually brings up a good point, if I may.
Yes.
So the Sex Workers Project is a legal and social services organization, and then there's also the Sex Workers Outreach Project, which is an advocacy organization. So they're two separate organizations, and I'm part of both.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an attorney with the Sex Workers Project. I'm an activist at Sex Workers Outreach Project. But just to clarify, I think it's important that you brought up the term street worker.
Yes.
Because I think, you know, there are a lot of sort of misnomers and stereotypes about the sex work community, and in fact, sex work encompasses a very broad array of professionals and individuals. So it can be people who do street-based work.
Yes.
And sort of that's, I think, what people first think of when they hear the
spent a lot
term
of time
sex
in Hunts
worker.
Point.
Yes, Hunts Point is an area, but it also, sex worker can also encompass exotic dancers, porn stars, phone sex operators, people who do dominatrix work. So it's a really broad
And also,
umbrella term.
as we were talking before the show, all genders.
And
It's not simply women.
Yes, and definitely all genders. I have clients that are women, men, and certainly transgender women, transgender men.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So tell us a little bit about how the Sex Workers Project began and how did it come to be?
Sure. Well, the Sex Workers Project, like I said, is a legal and social service organization which does direct interaction with clients. We have lawyers and social workers. So we have clients call us, we have a warm line, and we also have a website, which is www.sexworkersproject.org. We have a warm line, 646-602-5617.
We'll say that again. So
we'll say that again.
Yeah, right, yes.
People come to us, and we, like I said, we do direct advocacy, we do criminal
So it's not just
immigration.
has a legal problem.
No.
Help available.
There's
besides
definitely
legal.
other help available besides legal help. There is, like I said, we have a team of social workers, so there's one-on-one therapy, and there is legal advocacy, and we do a lot of referrals because we're a small staff, we can't take on everything. The Sex Workers Outreach Project, which I'm also here representing, is an activist, an advocacy group. So it's a network of individuals, sex workers and allies of sex workers, who come together once a month. We have meetings and we talk and we do different policy initiatives, like talking about no condoms as evidence, which I guess we'll talk
get into
about.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that. The other thing I'd like to ask you about is, I noticed in your literature the terminology, people who've been trafficked. Tell us the difference between a sex worker and someone who's a victim of trafficking.
Yes, thank you. That's a really important point, actually. That was one of the key issues that I wanted to talk about tonight, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there in the mainstream media about trafficking and sex work, and unfortunately they're often conflated. And people just assume that either all sex workers or prostitutes, as they're often referred to in mainstream media, are trafficked or forced. And that all policies, all criminal policies or governmental policies that might work for one set of people might work for everybody. So basically, at the Sex Workers Project and also with other sex worker organizations, we make very clear distinctions. Somebody who has been trafficked, that's a very clear distinction in both federal law and New York law, that there must be force, fraud, and coercion. Or if you're under the age of 18, that there's a level of inducement.
Right. Like the girl I was reading about in the paper today, who the police just freed her. She answered an ad, came to New York, thinking that somebody was going to help her, and wound up being held as a prisoner in the person's house for 9 days.
Right. I don't know that particular story.
It was in the paper today. Yeah.
But yes, that would be an example where somebody is misled into believing that they're doing one thing. If they come from another country, often their papers will be taken. None of the pay that they receive from their work will ever go to them. It will go to the trafficker.
But your organization deals with both facets?
Yes.
Okay.
So the Sex Workers Project is the only legal services organization, social service organization in the country that represents the broad spectrum. We represent people who do sex work by choice, circumstance, or coercion.
Right. How about Governor Spitzer's mistress? It was a prostitute, really. It wasn't his mistress. He was.
You mean in terms of the scandal?
Yes, right.
With Governor Spitzer.
I mean, I have a list of them here. I'm sorry if I gotta go by them.
No.
I think you have something to say on most of them, or at least can tell us that it has nothing to do with you.
Sure. I clearly had no involvement in that
Governor Spitzer.
Right.
But I think that what I would like to highlight from that situation, if I may, and I saw Client 9, the documentary. What really was interesting to me is the criminalization piece, because for me, and I know that my organization and the activists that I work with through SWAP and many other groups, we really believe in the decriminalization of sex work, because criminalization does a lot of harm, and I just do not see the good, and that's actually where the distinction between trafficking and sex work comes into play.
It's so important.
So important, because trafficking, I think everybody agrees that should be criminal.
Right.
The people who are trafficking should be criminalized. But sex workers, whether they're doing it by force or by choice, should not be criminalized because it doesn't help anybody. So in the Spitzer situation, unfortunately, what was shown in Client 9, or if you read any of the articles about it, the people that went to jail, people that now have felony convictions, are the people that were in the business, the sex work business that was brought down.
And the investigation that he was discovered.
Exactly.
Right, and now he's a TV star.
Exactly. So it's incredibly problematic, and that issue hasn't been looked into very deeply.
Still, the sex worker is victimized, even though they're providing a service that somebody wants to pay for.
Right. And so I think...
And somebody powerful and rich and influential wants to pay for it.
Right. I mean, in that scenario, whether or not he was doing something that was hypocritical, and he certainly did support policies, he certainly supported heightening, I could be misspeaking, but he supported criminalization of sex work.
I don't think you're misspeaking.
He certainly did. He busted rings.
He went after that with a vengeance.
He definitely did. So there was obviously a level of hypocrisy that I certainly object to in his situation. Sure. But what is deeply problematic is that people end up going to jail and have felony convictions, which will affect the rest of their lives because of what occurred.
For doing two consenting adults. I mean, it's just consenting adults, really.
Exactly.
In my opinion. And, they call it the oldest profession. And what's the negative aspect of sex work? I mean, why are people down on it? Does it contribute to a destruction of morals, or does it undermine the fiber of our society? I mean, does it? What's wrong with it? I mean, why are people so uptight about what consenting adults do?
Right. I think that's a great question that I certainly couldn't answer from the other perspective.
Right.
But I think that people have this idea. Certainly in America, and other countries don't have the same idea. Canada. It's not technically right. In Canada, it's not technically illegal. Although in Canada, everything sort of surrounding it is illegal. I think communicating around it, holding a house of prostitution. Although in Ontario, they have challenged that and won. But and the Netherlands, in Germany, parts of Australia.
What do you think about Nevada, for example?
That's what I was thinking.
In Nevada.
Do you think that's a model that could be used all over the United States, or do you think there's problems with the model they're using?
I think there are issues with that. I don't have a lot of knowledge about the Nevada situation.
But your group is for decriminalization, not legalization, right? Which is a big difference, actually.
There is a very big difference. I think the issue with the Nevada situation, and again, I'm not an expert on Nevada. I'm very, New York based.
Right. Sure.
And I'm not an expert on the laws in Nevada. But I think the issue with the Nevada situation, from what I have read and studied about it, is that it is very heavily regulated. Very heavily regulated. And only a very small subset of sex workers can ever engage in that system. You have to not have a felony conviction. You have to go through all the, tons of background checks. You have to often move into the brothel. for
as
a
your
certain period
residents.
of time.
Oh, wow.
Depending, I think each brothel, and again, I don't want to
different, but-
misspeak.
So they
but
know you, so they know everything about you.
Exactly. And most people are going to fall outside of that system, especially the people that are most marginalized.
And that are currently doing that type
that
of
are
work.
currently doing that type of
Well,
work.
let's talk about Hunts Point, because I mean, there's been documentaries about it, and I go there every day, and I see as the sun sets on a warm night, there's obviously something going on there. What do you work with those girls, or work with the situation, or how would you deal with that? How should we, save this community and save these poor women who are there?
Well, I mean, I never look at my work or my involvement as saving anybody.
Right.
I
That's good to
certainly
know.
never would use that term or terminology. I recognize that I'm coming to this work as somewhat of an outsider, and I don't view it as in any shape or form as I'm coming to change anybody's life or do anything or force anybody into or out of any situation. I come from a very harm reduction focused.
What did bring you to an interest in this type of advocacy?
For me personally, it was very much rooted in my feminist ideals. So I think for me, at a very young age, I became very rooted in the feminist movement, the feminist cause, even as young as maybe 12, 13 years old.
But not the anti-pornography division of feminism.
Actually, it's funny that you say that, because initially, my initial instinct, I remember back in high school, and I grew up right outside the city, and I remember coming into New York, and there were many groups that were set up, this is, in the late 80s, early 90s, about anti-pornography, and I remember being drawn to that initially, and thinking, oh yes, that does harm women, that is harmful. And then when I got older and was reading a lot more, I studied undergrad, I did gender studies, I did my thesis on sex work and my master's thesis on sex work, and so I really, academically, this has been a really critical issue for me. I realized that doesn't make any sense, just practically speaking, because that doesn't reflect any reality.
That's
and
right.
I also just personally, even aside from whether it reflects reality or not, I actually just aesthetically and everything else don't have a problem with anybody doing sex work, with anybody doing pornography, prostitution. But so I think for me, and that is a huge tension in the feminist movement.
It is.
Sex work is a very
We've had guests on who's
a hard issue,
who consider of the left, who are very extremely down on the sex work, and their point of view is that the way that women are portrayed undermines their future role as leaders of society.
Very much so. And I think, and I'm still very much consider myself a feminist, and I'm part of the feminist movement, and think that the sex workers movement is very tied to feminism.
Absolutely.
So I'm definitely not trying to speak ill of the feminist movement, and there is no unified feminist movement, I think, at this point, where sort of third wave, post-third wave feminism, and I think there's so many diverse communities within the feminist movement, but I really, it is a struggle
to balance these concerns.
Certainly not for me personally, because for me it's very much about personal choice, and I think it's about realizing that people have bodily integrity and bodily choice. And I think you can't, as a feminist, say to another, whether it's a woman, a man, a transgender woman, transgender man, that you're being objectified, or you're, being disempowered by the choices that you are making.
Or you have no right to do this with your own body. I mean,
exactly.
That's what you're saying. Very interesting. So what are some, we have I don't know, somebody's calling right now.
Oh, good.
Well, they could try again. Here we go, yes. Let's try it, and you're on. Go ahead.
Hello?
Am I on the air?
Yes, you're on the air.
I got a comment regarding the decriminalization of prostitution.
Okay.
Okay.
Like you're saying, I agree with you that they shouldn't be punished and all, right? But what happens if somebody contracts a sexual disease as a result?
That's a good question. Should I?
Well, yeah, go ahead and answer.
Answer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Personally, I do not believe that should be criminalized in any way. If somebody goes and contracts an STI from either a personal sexual encounter at a bar or anywhere else, or from somebody that they are paying for sexual services, I don't believe that should be criminalized. I think that's incredibly problematic. In many ways, it will push people further underground, because I think any criminalization pushes people especially people who are marginalized and stigmatized, further underground. I think the problem is that there is an assumption and I'm not saying that the caller is making this assumption, but I think there is an assumption of sex work community. There's been a long time assumption they are vectors of disease.
Yeah.
And that is just fundamentally not true. I think actually sex workers are an incredible community to learn sexual health and sexual safety from. And I'm constantly blown away from my allies and friends and clients who are sex workers by their sexual health knowledge and by their desire to protect themselves.
Which, why don't we segue into the condoms not being used as evidence?
Thank you very much, Paul.
Okay, but let's talk
Broudo
about...
from the Sex Workers Project, which represents and works with people in the streets, advocates for them, and other places as well where the sex industry is, and one of the largest industries in America, if not the whole world. And we're talking now about some of the legislation that's being discussed right now, and one was the... Go ahead.
Yes.
Tell us.
So right now there is a bill pending in the New York State Legislature, and we're incredibly excited about it. Both the Sex Workers Outreach Project, Sex Workers Project, many other groups have been working very hard on this legislation. It is we call it the No Condoms as Evidence bill, which basically means that condoms would not be used as evidence of prostitution. Because right now, evidence law is very broad. You can basically use anything, if it's relevant and not too prejudicial, as evidence in a trial. And what happens in New York, and it happens in many other locations, D.C. has a very active sex work community. I know it happens in D.C., it happens in California, it happens in many other places, but we happen to be in New York. There is actually, when you arrest somebody for loitering for the purpose of prostitution, there's even a separate page that the police fill out, and they put how many condoms, if there's lube, other sexual debris like wrappers. So they really take it very seriously. But the interesting thing is, since 1971, the New York City Health Department has given out male condoms.
Right.
And they pride themselves on giving out male condoms, and it's a great campaign. But the problem is that with one hand, the city is giving out condoms, the other hand, the police are taking them
prosecute you for
away.
having one. Yeah.
Right. And so we hear anecdotally from clients and other people in the industry that they fear carrying condoms, that it really is an issue for them, that they'll just take one or two, even though there is no limit. It's not if you have more than three or you have
isn't
four.
it interesting to people who are not sex workers that carrying condoms could be evidence of being a prostitute?
Sure. I mean,
for all the sexually active people out there who just happen to carry a few condoms just in case.
Sure.
Or if it's a guy, it's like, hey, yeah, man.
Right.
If it's a girl, it's evidence of prostitution.
Right. And I mean, obviously, the way our criminal justice system tends to run, only certain people will be stopped.
Will they use that against people?
And harassed in certain neighborhoods, Hunts Point,
Sure.
many other neighborhoods, depending on what they're wearing, what they look like. Certainly if certain people were carrying 50 condoms, they probably would never, ever be stopped.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly problematic. So we've gotten a ton of allies from the public health community. It really is a public
Who's
health
supporting?
issue.
Is this in the city council?
It's in the New York State.
State legislature. Who's advocating it? Who's
to be honest,
Tom Duane, I imagine, and
he has definitely been an ally of progressive legislation on issues related to health and related to rights.
Well, you know what that reminds me, talking about politicians, is what about NIMBY, not in my backyard? Because there's many, for example, outreach facilities for people that have been set up and then picketed by the community, right? Even in Greenwich Village, a supposedly liberal area, where this kind of thing would be acceptable. There's still always a NIMBY sort of thing to it.
There is always a NIMBY issue.
And not in my backyard. Where does that push? Is that why it's in places like the docks and the market and
right
on the edges of society?
It always goes to sort of the more industrial or sort of more not as fancy neighborhoods. And I think it's, I think one reason that people who work on the street-based workers, right? Yeah. That's what comes to mind, I think, when a lot of people think about sex workers. And they, are the street-based workers, especially female street-based workers, although men and transgender women, especially transgender women, and we can maybe get to that issue in a moment, are heavily prosecuted as well, is because it is seen as a nuisance issue on top of being a sex work issue.
Right.
So, for me...
Like homeless people on the street or heroin addicts shooting up your stairwell or something like that, right?
Exactly. So I don't know if people are so offended by the fact that consensual adults are trading sex for money. It's more that it might be out in the open.
And they'll see it.
Right.
Are brothels back in New York? I know New York, I was reading a history of New York, and brothels were what New York was about. I mean, is that where most... Has things changed? Does most sexual activity for money in New York happen on the streets or inside?
I think I think it's not a measurable thing. I would certainly say that, the internet has altered the way that people engage in pretty much anything.
Right. So that always
the other question I have is, along those lines, is what is the participation in an outreach group or an activist group like you belong to in terms of the range of sex workers? Like, do you have a majority of girls who are exotic dancers, or are there more prostitutes that work on the street, or more prostitutes that are call girls working out of where they go to a hotel room and rent a hotel room? And do you have a wide range of girls, or is it concentrated in one area?
Right. No, that's a great question. I think with a lot of the activist work I do with the Sex Workers Outreach Project, we tend to have people who do mostly internet-based work, but I think that's a wide range of people are doing internet-based work. First of all, it's a winner. Second of all, it's safer. You could usually screen clients. It's just a better way an easier way to conduct business. But so I think in the activist community, it does tend to be people who might be doing some escorting. There's a lot of students who are doing escorting on the side, who might be in PhD programs, that type of thing, or who might be doing some dominatrix work, might be doing dancing. Whereas our clients at the Sex Workers Project, a lot of them are more street-based, and also many of my clients are survivors of trafficking. So they were, often forced either to be on the street or
do you work with the sex crimes victims group up at Lenox Hill?
Roosevelt.
Way up by Columbia University, the hospital up there.
Oh, I thought it was Roosevelt.
Oh, Roosevelt. Yeah, it was here too. Right. It's also Roosevelt Hospital.
Because our friend Ramel Washington works with
the Sex Crime Victims Treatment Center. That's what it is.
I believe I'm aware of it. I don't know it personally. Maybe one of the places that our social workers.
Well, how do you work with traffickers, with people who've been victims of trafficking? What kind of work do you do with that?
Well, we, like I said, we have attorneys and social workers. So what I do is I work specifically on certain motions where I'm trying to vacate prior convictions for prostitution and loitering for the purpose of prostitution for survivors of trafficking. And actually, this was a piece of legislation that Sex Workers Project was instrumental in writing, and the whole activist community was really instrumental in helping to pass. And Dwayne as well.
Tom Dwayne, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, we have another call. We'll give it a shot. Let's see. Hopefully it'll be a good one. You're on. Welcome to Let Them Talk.
Hi there. Good evening. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
How are you?
I just got a question for the lady in the middle. How long have you been working with with sex workers?
Hi. I've been doing sex worker advocacy in various forms for about 11 years, and I've been at the Sex Workers Project for a little over a year as an attorney.
And how do you find it?
How do I find it?
Do you find it rewarding?
Oh, it's incredibly rewarding. I, basically went to law school because of this issue. I went to law school. I said I want to decriminalize prostitution. I, of course, then realized, considering that it's a state-by-state law,
it's going to take a while.
It's going to take a little bit of time. But
it's good to have a mission.
You're right. For me, it's my life.
Let's give out some information again about how to get in touch with the project for people who might need it or people who might want to know more about it. So.
Definitely. So there's two different organizations, as I mentioned. The Sex Workers Project, which has legal and social services, you can reach us. We have a warm line, which means it's a hotline. It's not 24 hours. That's 646-602-5617.
And if you call this number...
Say that number again more slowly, please.
Sure. 646-602-5617. We also have a website, www.sexworkersproject, just as you would imagine it's spelled, .org. And the Sex Workers Outreach Project, which is an activist group, you can reach the Sex Workers Outreach Project at www.swop-nyc.org.
And just type in, just search for Sex Workers Project in New York City, and it'll come right up, I'm sure.
Yes.
Now, I noticed also on your brochure that you have a note next to the phone number. If you call us and want us to call you back, leave a safe time to call you back. So you're very protective of your clients.
Yes.
So people don't have to be afraid to call that number.
Right. We're very protective of anybody that calls the warm line for the Sex Workers Project. We are, you can call and you don't even need to leave a name, or you can leave a fake name. You can certainly say it's not safe to call this number, I'll call you back, or it's only safe to call at X time, and we'll try our best, certainly, to accommodate you. We know that many of the people that contact us are survivors of trafficking, or may still be in trafficking situations, or just maybe in other unsafe situations.
One thing I want to, we have a minute and a half, just recently 4 bodies were found of women who had sold themselves through Craigslist out on Long Island. What about that, the safety issues, the issues of the insane people out there who seem to pick on
victimized prostitutes?
Yes, that's a very important point that I want to talk to, and then I'm going to make a quick announcement before we finish.
Have a minute.
Okay, so violence against sex workers is a huge issue that we face, and I think criminalization really plays into that, because sex workers often do not feel comfortable coming forward and saying, I was victimized. They don't feel comfortable coming forward to friends, family, allies, and police.
Law enforcement, right.
They might be further victimized by police. They might be arrested. This is a very serious issue. Just want to make a quick announcement. I know we don't have a lot of time, but March 3rd is the International Day to recognize sex workers' rights. There are a few events. March 1st is a community potluck. You can contact our warm line or look at our website and get in touch with us to find out the information. March 3rd is a special Red Umbrella Diaries, or Sex Worker Literati. That happens at Happy Ending from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Happy Ending is a bar on the Lower East Side. It's on Broome. And that will be in honor, it happens every first Thursday of the month, but that will be in honor of Sex Workers International Rights Day. So I just wanted to put in a little plug for that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming.
Yes, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right.